Hello, my name is Joyce Hunter, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Critical Infrastructure Technology, ICIT, a cybersecurity think tank. And I'd like to welcome you to this InfoSec session with Chief Cathy Lanier. It's so wonderful to actually have an opportunity to work with her again. We were connected 3 years ago, and each of us has had our own separate careers since then. At the time, she was the head of the NFL, Chief Information Security Officer, and I was just leaving the federal government as the Deputy CIO of the USDA. Our world is becoming increasingly interrelated between interconnectivity in networks, IoT, IIoT, and the shift to a remote work environment. Corresponding with the increase in interconnectivity is an increase in overlap between cyber and physical security concerns. 2021 demonstrated the efficacy of cyber physical attacks. These incidences include attacks that crippled the healthcare, manufacturing, energy, and higher education sectors. Various apps and social media platforms have been integrated into the fan experience. Connectivity in stadiums has grown significantly, making it even more important to be operating in a secure network. The phrase cyber convergence was coined to describe the overlap between cyber and physical security. CISA recommends that business leaders develop a holistic security strategy that encompasses both cyber and physical security. In this fireside chat, Chief Cathy Lanier will discuss her perspectives on the increasing connection between cyber and physical security, emerging trends with integrated technology, safeguards, and best practices. Chief Cathy Lanier is the Senior Vice President of Security for the National Football League. Over her 26 years in law enforcement and counterterrorism, Chief Lanier has become known for her game-changing leadership. Prior to serving in her current role as Senior Vice President and Chief of Security, Chief Lanier had the position of Chief of Police with the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department from 2007 to 2016. She rose through the ranks of MPD to earn various commendable honors, including becoming the first female police chief of the nation's capital, the first commanding officer of Homeland Security, and the counterterrorism for DC Police, one of a small number of female chiefs in the nation at the time, and the longest serving chief on the DC force. Welcome, Chief Lanier. Thank you very much for being able to join us.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So let me start off with, to level set, how do you define cyber versus physical security? And did the explosive increase in interconnectivity change your definition?
You know, it's getting more and more difficult to define them separately these days because there are physical elements to cyber and there are cyber elements to physical. So I try and refer to security as security when I work with, I have a very integrated group here, but really there's no way to separate the two anymore. So to define them independently almost doesn't do justice for what it is that you're trying to accomplish when you provide security as a whole.
So as the Chief of Security for the National Football League, and having the security for all 32 NFL teams and their venues, you have to collaborate with federal, state, and local law enforcement. How do you herd the cats and get a coalition of the willing to move forward on a strategy?
Well, you know, it's the same thing in whatever your profession is. You always, collaboration is the key to success. I mean, there's not always an opportunity 100% of the time to collaborate with every partner, but most often there are, and you have to find those and create those opportunities. You know, everybody has a mission. I used to say in Washington, D.C., you know, I was responsible for the city of Washington, D.C. as the police chief, and the president, the vice president, the first lady move around the city every single day. We work with the Secret Service and the Capitol Police and Park Police to accommodate these different moves of foreign heads of state, the president and vice president. And the key to that integration and working with so many different partners and making sure that the collaboration got us all where we wanted to go was understanding each other's mission, right? So I understood that the Secret Service had one mission, and that is protect the president and move him around the city. My job was to protect the city and move it around the president. So it is totally about respecting everybody else's mission, leaving your egos at home, and finding ways to collaborate and to negotiate to get things get to a place where everybody can meet their mission successfully.
And that is the key, is collaboration, coordination, and communication.
Yes.
And prior to 9/11, the communication piece of that was a bit of a challenge. And there were, where we couldn't actively communicate, but things have changed since then. And so you're able to get that cross-agency communication going.
Yes, I'm a big fan of, look, I post 9/11, I was in the Homeland Security counterterrorism business in the police department. I had an opportunity to participate in that information sharing environment, the work that went into the information sharing environment. And it has served me well over the past 20 years.
But you know what? Listening to you talk about how you used to collaborate with various departments when you were chief of police here, that kind of set you up for the job that you have now, don't you think?
It really did. It's very similar in that, the 32 clubs, the teams, independently owned. Not every stadium is owned by the club. So some of the stadiums are owned by or managed by a different entity other than the owner of the club where the teams play. And then sometimes they're owned by a government or operated by the government. So there are multiple partners surrounding every decision that we make in terms of security requirements, movements, and providing that level of security. But certainly in Washington, D.C., a place where there is arguably 32 different authorized law enforcement entities, it was a job that required that skill for much of my career.
Okay, no kidding. The physical layer, merging physical and cybersecurity is pretty rare.
Yes.
What is the best way to have a physical security and cybersecurity convergence at an organizational level when that organization is federated?
I tell you, it's not easy. When I got to the NFL, cybersecurity was in the IT department and security was security. I've always been a big proponent for innovation, so I've always pushed innovation, but I don't push innovation just for efficiency and effectiveness, right? That's the most important part of innovation, is you want to be more effective and more efficient, but you also need to be safer. So I push innovation so that we can be more effective and more efficient, but also safer. And without having that access to the cybersecurity team to be able to do that, I was moving all of this new innovation, all these new technologies, and then integrating those technologies. And as you add layers of technology and you start integrating those technologies, your attack surface becomes larger and larger and larger. And then the ability to protect not only the operation itself, but to make sure that the integrations are done in a way that you don't have cascading failures. So for me, it was a non-starter. I had to have cybersecurity as a part of my team. As I mentioned earlier, the definition of cybersecurity and physical security can no longer be defined independently. They really are part of a total security environment. So it took me a couple of years, but I finally was able to get cybersecurity team working with me on our team, and it really has been beneficial for all of us at the league.
That's great.
It's a sales job, in other words, Joyce. It starts with, I had a colleague once describe the way I try to pull this through is I went to the CISO and I asked him to dance. Invite him to the party, come down and see what we do in security. And I want to partner with you. And this CISO was 100% for the integration, realized the urgency. And I think when it comes to organizationally where cybersecurity and physical security sit, the urgency that comes along with a security request is very different than the urgency that comes along with an IT request. So I think it's a shift in the way that the organization looks at securing and making the entire organization safe. And the way that that I found most useful for pushing this envelope is security should not just be securing the physical people, assets, not guards, gates, and guns, right? My job is to secure everything about the NFL, to protect the brand, to protect the reputation, to protect the, the intellectual property. So all those things are important, which is why we do due diligence with third-party vendors, which is why we do all the other things that we do. So by integrating cyber in with the physical security, I can be much more effective at protecting all of those other things. Look at the impact if someone were to hack our Twitter site, someone were to hack, so this is part of security, securing the reputation, the brand, all of those assets of the league. And it's not just people, places, and things, it is everything.
I love that term that you use, guns, gates, and guards.
Guards, gates, and guns. Everybody
okay.
thinks guards, gates, and guns. There's so much within that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I absolutely love that. That's great. So let's go back to the physical layer, because we're talking about the physical layer is sometimes a starting point to cybersecurity. So where do you think we diverge from thinking of cyber and physical as security?
See, this is where I found that people in cybersecurity and people in physical security actually speak the same language, right? We do actually speak the same language, and security is security. Nothing is going to be secured by a single layer, a single tool, or a single technology. Security must account for multiple layers of protection, but always begins with detection, deterrence, and prevention, right? So the goal is to make it nearly impossible for an adversary to succeed. So thinking of the physical layers and the cyber layers is kind of, yesterday. Today is nothing is secured by a single layer, a single tool, or a single technology. We have to layer those things, and we always layer them, those layers on top of the priority, which is detect, deter, and prevent first. Stopping them once they get to the gate is the last resort. We don't want them to get to the gate.
Right. Exactly. That's great. So when you merge physical and cybersecurity, and you have to go overseas and work with people who could potentially have a different setup, how do you get them to understand that physical and cyber are both the same thing?
We just came back from London, and we worked in, we also do international with, right now we're London and Mexico, but we are expanding, we're exploring Germany and other international locations. We have offices in China. So there are different rules, requirements, and things to be aware of in different international locations. But certainly in the UK, we found that their IT, OT, security level of knowledge and proactive stance was very, very strong. So very happy with the position that we found ourselves in when we just played the last two games, the past 2 weekends in a row in London.
That's great. That's great. And when do you go? When is the Mexico?
So we normally do 4 London and 2 Mexico every year. Mexico did not go forward this year because of COVID. And we only did 2 instead of 4 London games. But I'm hoping by next year we'll be back in full swing with Mexico and London, and then beyond. I think we're going to start expanding to other locations now.
That'll be great. That would be great. Giving other countries the American football.
Yes.
So when talking about physical security, we generally think of environmental protections. Is this viewpoint changing?
In my opinion, not fast enough. The security profession is a culture that is very traditional, and it's not changing fast enough. And I think that is on both sides, both on the physical security side and the traditional cybersecurity side. These are professions that are not adapting as quickly as the threats are evolving. I'd like to see this evolution go much faster so that we can keep pace with the threats. But just my opinion, I think we're still largely stuck in an old model of thinking, and we really need to get out of that.
Yeah. What is the term? Culture eats strategy for breakfast.
That's exactly right.
And trying to get people to come along is very difficult. And thank goodness the NFL sees this as a priority. Like you said,
Yeah.
it's your brand. And the culture is everybody's got to do it. Everybody's got to be secure.
And we have a huge digital footprint too. So this goes beyond just the traditional, and we have an extremely large digital footprint. So cyber is crucial for us as a league.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So how do we get organizations, stepping a little bit out of the NFL, how do we get organizations to take this seriously? I'm looking at the recent ransomware attacks, and particularly the fact that 1,400 institutions of higher education have been hacked since 2020. And you know what they think? They think, oh, it's not going to happen to me. You know, it's that we're okay. How do you change that?
It's funny. I used to ride a motorcycle and patrol when I was a police officer. And the first thing they teach you in motorcycle training, in the motorcycle course training, was, there are two kinds of people out there: those that have gone down on the bike, had an accident on the bike, and those that are going to go down on the bike. Right? It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like we're in that environment now, that there are people who, when you talk about cybersecurity, they kind of act like they got blinders on. It's in the room. I don't really see it. It's not there.
Yes.
And those are the people that are going to, unfortunately, I think, learn once an attack actually occurs. But I think for the most part, organizations are starting to realize just how significant the threat is, and how impactful it can be to an organization. And it's not just ransomware. I mean, if you think about over the past decade, how much of our supply chain has been outsourced, and where that outsourcing has gone. How much of everything in our everyday life now is owned and has a chip or something in it that belongs to China. I just put it out there. And so how significant could that be for us if there were a convergent attack? I mean, just that's the thing I think that drives me to make sure that I'm pushing as much of the organizations that I have opportunity to interact with to think about this, a little bit more strategically.
Absolutely. I always tell people, particularly, well, why are they going after, schools? Like, they're not going after the students. They're going after who the students are related to.
Well, and then if you think about it, cyber attacks are, I mean, this is a weapon, right? So it's a weapon. And if you think about terrorism in general, the tactics of terrorism, obviously this is a financially driven, almost exclusively financially driven for what we see currently today, but it also could be used as a weapon of war. So we have to think about it a little bit more holistically here, that this is cyber attacks, depending on the nature and how they are carried out, can be more than just for financial gain. And I think people need to keep that in the back of their mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So moving on to additional cyber protections, how can we get the average end user to be more serious? Because phishing is, of course, as we know, a very, very serious. And I learned early on, right click, right? If you don't recognize it, or you think, it looks familiar, but you're not quite sure, look at the extensions. And how do we get people to just stop clicking through the mandatory cybersecurity tests?
Right. The human firewall is the biggest weak link in this whole chain. I mean, I'm sure that there's a huge education component here, and it's not educate people once and you're done. It's a constant education. We have requirements for our employees that they have to do monthly training on cybersecurity. They are short, they are precise, and they're very effective. And we're not 100%, right? The weakest link is the human firewall. Somebody's going to be in a hurry. There's going to be, a spear phishing or a phishing attack that makes it through all of our tools, right? Makes it past all of our tools and technologies, and it gets to the right person. And that person who's, taken the training every month and knows their stuff, just is in a hurry that day and clicks the link. Right? It's just we have to be right every time. The bad guy only has to be right once.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So let's go back to the start of the pandemic. Everybody went home. Were you prepared for that? Did you have the proper protocols in place so that everybody can get a laptop and work from home?
We did, and I will tell you, it's in hindsight, it's almost ironic how the timing worked out. We, as a part of our business continuity, annual business continuity exercise, we have to exercise our business continuity plan every year. And we just decided in 2019 that we were going to exercise the coop from home plan. And so we picked one day, and it was a Friday, so we knew everybody would be happy about it. We picked one day where we did a 100% coop from headquarters, and we pushed out, hey, this is going to be a 100% coop and everybody's moved home. And we did it on our Friday for a lot of reasons. One, to make people happy, but two, to test some of those things like payroll, like invoicing, those sort of things. And it turned out to be a really good decision on our part. Look, nobody has a crystal ball, but this is what continuity planning is all about. I mean, think about it. Even along those lines, for decades, we've been preparing for, as a nation, for, hey, bad things can happen. You need to be prepared to have 3 to 5 days without power and have food and water, right? 3 to 5 days. This pandemic has been 18 months.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So there, no matter how well prepared anybody is, there's always going to be that game changer, right? There's always going to be that thing that is going to change the game. 9/11 changed the game. The pandemic certainly has changed the game.
Absolutely. And will everybody go back to the way it was before? Everybody in offices? Don't know. That's still to be decided.
Right.
On what's going to happen.
And we got kind of a double challenge because we went, and I was actually in Las Vegas the week that everything shut down in March, and we were planning for our draft, which was coming just in a month or so, the end of April. And we were in our final planning meetings, and we had just met with local public health officials because the virus was starting to pick up in different states. And at any rate, I was in Vegas when everything shut down, and I'll never forget flying home on a plane, literally almost by myself.
Wow.
And we were a month and a half out from draft, and the commissioner made a decision to go forward with draft and go forward with it virtually. So we had to put together the first ever virtual draft, and we had to do it in 8 weeks. So it was really, and we did it when there were quarantine requirements that were different state by state, and we had to have live cameras and broadcast elements in the homes of all of the head coaches.
Oh my goodness.
Or the prospects, the head coaches, the commissioner. It was a monumental task. So while everybody else was shutting down and all the quarantine orders were in place across the state lines, we were able to pull off quite successfully the first virtual draft. And I'll never forget the pace with which we worked to make that happen.
I can imagine. Probably one of those 24/7 kinds of things, just to make sure all the network connections were.
And then running the operation with 5 computer screens in front of me to make sure that we were linked with everybody we needed to be linked with.
Sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I think, is the CIO still female? Is Michelle still there?
Michelle McKenna is still here, yes.
Okay, well, great. You are one of the first organizations that has both the security officer and the CIO, both women.
Well, I tell you what, it's interesting you brought that up, because if it were not for Michelle, I don't know that I would have been successful in bringing the cyber team over to my side. And God, I hope this doesn't sound wrong, but I think women have a different way of negotiating with other women, right? So we went into this discussion I mean, just really with an open mind to kind of work this out. We communicated very well. And, Michelle had no ego in this, asking to take a pretty significant chunk of the operation that she had. She, when we sat down and discussed it, she agreed with me, and she didn't have any ego in the, there's no ego in the room.
Yeah.
And I've always said that it just her willingness to sit down and talk through this with me and make this move with me and negotiate how we split those responsibilities, because this took a chunk, we had to split up people who had multiple duties as well. So everybody took a little bit of a dip to make this happen, but it was a decision that was necessary, and everybody committed to it. So Michelle McKenna is the reason that this worked out so well.
That's great. So looking at that model, what can we do to bring more women or get more women interested? I think you've seen the same studies that I have, that early on, young girls are great in STEM. Somewhere around junior high school, they start waning away from STEM programs. And then by the time they get to graduate school, there's almost no women in those programs, all depending on the school, of course. So how can we encourage or, incentivize more people, first of all, to look at more women, and second of all, more women at the young stages? Because I do a nonprofit camp for 14 to 17-year-olds. And if you get them at that age, they're very interested and they want to pursue those kinds of opportunities.
Look, it's the same for a lot of professions. I went through this in policing. I came on in 1990, right? There was women were not even allowed to ride in patrol cars alongside men until 1972. That's in my lifetime. So in my lifetime, women were not allowed to ride in patrol cars along with men, and I became the chief of police. So it's an evolution, and it was a significant evolution. But I think the best thing that we can do is we can model, right? We can show successful women that are in these roles that are successful, right? So that are doing well. We need those successful women to mentor other women. And this is, you always got to turn back around and offer a hand up to the guy behind you or the girl behind you, right? And this is an area where I think women's networking can do better. We could all do better. We need to make sure that we are mentoring young women and pushing them towards those professions where we know women are very, very good.
Yes.
Right? Very good. Look at policing. Women are such good communicators, and what in the world was missing, early in the early 90s was sorely lacking in policing was the communications with the community. It was the enforcer model, and nobody was talking with people in the community, and so women brought a significant benefit to the profession. And I think the same is true in the cyber world. I think we have a role as women that are in these jobs to bring other women along.
And I think for the most part, women are very used to multitasking and looking at multiple situations and scenarios at the same time, and trying to, looking at all the plates and balls that are in the air and say, okay, that one, and being pretty accurate.
That's what we do, right? Multitasking, that's what we do.
Absolutely. Yes, we do. Are there any other comments that you would like to make at this time, or any closing remarks?
First, thank you for having me on and for covering this topic. I wish it was much more widespread, that there were a much larger percentage of our larger corporations that have made this leap to integrate cyber and physical security. And really, I think part of what's holding all that back is on the physical security side, people who don't feel like they can do both. They don't know the profession both. I spent 27 years in law enforcement. I fascinated by technology, learned the cybersecurity piece of this over the course of years on my own. It's not that difficult. And the same goes for the cyber folks. It's not that difficult to learn the physical requirements. We speak the same language. We're all doing the same job. It's just kind of moving those barriers so people get more comfortable with this. So hats off to you for bringing this on as a topic. Hopefully more people that are listening here will consider this as a part of their corporate requirements in the future. I think it's just a matter of time before people realize that this really is an important part of securing your organization.
And with the increase in technology everywhere, it's
Yeah.
going to even be more critical that we have that combination together.
Well, look, I've said to many people that the pandemic pushed so many technologies that have been there for a good period of time, some for years, and were not adopted. The pandemic pushed them all right in our face, and people
Yeah.
accepted and adopted those technologies because it was necessary to get by, right? It was a requirement. And now that those technologies are out there, and they should have been out there years ago, I believe we were just too cautious. But so now that we've got all these technologies out there and everything is contactless, touchless, everything is integrated. You know, it's one single thing. It's AI, it's facial recognition, it's food and beverage, it's the fan experience, it's security screening. They're all tied in together. And you know, this is a significant move.
Yeah.
The pandemic has pushed us farther and faster than we have in the past 10 years, moved with the integrations of technologies here. So this is a different day. And so people have to start keeping pace.
It definitely is. And we appreciate your taking the time out of your very busy schedule to talk with us about how you traverse that physical and cybersecurity. And we look forward to the rest of the season, which is shaping up to be pretty interesting. And we look forward to seeing more of what you're going to do from a technology perspective and for encouraging other young women to pursue cyber and physical security as a career.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your patience. I apologize for the lighting challenges here. I'm on the road. As you know, it's season for us. So I have to carpet bag where I can, but it was a great panel. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much and have a great weekend.
All right, you too.